On most channel strips, if I just scoot this up here, you'll see an EQ section like this. They may just have a few knobs, that they may be quite comprehensive like this one right here. Basically, this is a 4-band EQ. You have your lows, low mids, high mids, and highs right there. And all of these knobs are basically allowing you to boost an amount and then center where that frequency is going to be boosted around. Instead of kind of doing this in the dark over here, here's a better way to look at it over here. This is going to give us a graphical kind of response to exactly what we're going to be doing with this EQ right here. And you can see that we have our lows to our highs, and we'll be able to see what these EQs are going to be doing. So let's break them all down here. I said very early on we were talking about low cuts. If you employ this guy here, this will just take a very steep filter right at 30 Hertz and just cut everything below that. I think we showed you that kind of graphic before. Quite often you'll see that in some microphones. So that's what a low cut will do. Then we'll talk about our shelving EQs, which is on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. This is analogous to this side and also this side. And here's why they're called shelving. If we think of this as a bookshelf here, then the bookends would be on the left and the right. And if I was to employ this guy right here and bring up the gain, you can see that we're boosting from this point on down. Up here on the high shelf, we'd be boosting from that point on up. Let me just take these guys back to where they were. So let's actually hear what that sounds like. I mean, basically, your shelving EQs are your basic bass and treble. You've got your bass down here and your treble here. On a standard EQ, you'd normally just have a gain, so anything past 12 o'clock would be boosting, anything to the left would be reducing. But there's an extra couple of knobs right here. Here's where your frequency will actually be centered around. So if we were to boost that, you can see you can boost it from the very lows or more into your low mids. So let's hear an actual example of this. Let's boost some treble. Take some treble out. So that's fair enough. We've seen them before, right? Just bass and treble. Let me just take these guys out here. So now we've got our shelves, our bookends taken care of. Let's look at the EQ in the middle. And basically you have a couple of parametric EQs in the middle. And they are called typically peaking EQs because instead of working from a certain point on up or a certain point on down, these guys peak in the middle in kind of a bell curve. So then you can see that we are boosting around a particular frequency, which is adjusted right here. And you can sweep that up and down, and then you can adjust the width. So how many neighboring frequencies are you going to be affecting? You could either get in there very surgically like this, perhaps to just take out a very narrow notch of frequencies, or you could widen that up and give just a gentle boost at a particular frequency. So let's have a listen to how these guys sound. Let's sweep it around. Obviously, that's a lot of gain. We're boosting up 18 dB at those particular frequencies. So that's why you're hearing some of that distortion. I would not be boosting that amount of EQ, that's for sure. Take note that some channels may not have as many knobs here on the EQ, may not have as many bands, but you can kind of get an idea of what's going on right over here. Now I have some EQ recipes in your workbooks with examples that you can practice on. There are definitely certain frequency ranges that you should be familiar with, and also please take note of the tonal character of the material you're dealing with. For instance, boosting 10K on a kick drum is probably not the wisest thing to do, because the kick drum does not live up here, right? Conversely, boosting 100 hertz on a guitar track is just going to get kind of in the way of the instruments that do live down there, like the kick drum and the bass guitar. I'm really careful to kind of carve out a lot of stuff down here, as that's where the oomph kind of instruments are, and I need a lot of power to move those speakers. The stuff down here thumps you in the chest. I just typically want to get everything out of the way so that the important instruments have space to use all the energy they need right down here. Anyway, we'll talk about EQ in the mixing section in the next session, but this is kind of a good place to start. Now, a de-esser is a cross between a compressor and an EQ. You want to take a stab at why I chose this graphic? Yes, a de-esser squashes certain frequencies. In other words, it is a frequency-specific compressor. I mean, have you ever noticed that some sounds that we produce with our voices are kind of harsh? The sibilants, such as S's and T's, that work by rushing air over our palate. If you go through and speak the alphabet ABC, you can hear and highlight all of these sibilants. Now, notice how harsh these sounds can be. It would sure be cool if we had a compressor that just zeroed in, instead of compressing everything, just zeroed in on those frequencies that, depending on the individual, can be anywhere between, say, about 4 and 10K. So a de-esser just compresses a small sliver of frequencies, and your job would be to slide around those frequencies until you hear those sibilants start to tame down.